Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching with us again. My name is Conrad Mazeika. I'm the president of the Baltic American Freedom League. We have a special segment today, which is we are live streaming the Helsinki Commission congressional hearing on European energy security and in Ukraine and what they're doing. And so I do have some special guests with me that, straight from Ukraine. And we also have our regular retired Colonel Kęstutis Aibekonis. So let me bring them onto the screen, everybody. So welcome panel.
Heidi.
Thanks for joining for this special. So let me see here. Let me pull this up on my.
We lost somebody there.
Oh. Okay, give me 1 second. So we have 3 ladies straight from Mariupol, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I muted you on accident.
Hello.
Yes. So we have Albina Litvina, Valeria Havritkova, Irina Prudkova on with us. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for invite.
So you are here all on a special tour before we jump into the commission, and I'll just keep an eye on the stream there from the U.S. Congress. Tell the audience why you're here in the United States.
Albina?
Can repeat, please?
Yeah. So you're in the United States, and what brings you to the United States at this point?
We are in Chicago now. Yep. And was in LA with screening film Mariupolis 2 and Mariupolis 1. And I'm sorry for my bad English.
That's okay. That means it's real. It's authentic. That's you're straight from Ukraine. And so the ladies here are straight from Ukraine, from Mariupol, the region that is very shelled by the Russians in Ukraine. And they have this documentary that they're traveling across the country and to show exactly their perspective, because they're on the ground filming it, and their crew was there for this documentary, which was very eye-opening to people that have no idea what's going on in Ukraine. And so the one of the filmmakers, who's Lithuanian, was captured and tortured to death on here. So we have a great perspective from you ladies. So thank you, Dякую, for coming in to join us today for this special.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, all people in USA.
We'll do our best with the translation. It's not a problem. I mean, it was nice because your mom had her phone and she spoke in Ukrainian, and she just told me, and so we we'll make it happen today on there. So I guess my question is, what the topic that Congress is going to talk about is energy security, and what is Ukraine doing for power, electricity, and gas involved with energy and benzene and gasoline? What are they doing out there that you can share with us?
I understand our question, but but it's problem ask for this in Ukrainian. Maybe I when I see a price for petrol in USA, I was very zdivovana in Ukrainian, but I don't this word in in English. Very wow in Ukrainian. Same the price. One liter. Same one. No, plus minus $1 in Ukrainian, the same price for petrol, but in Ukrainian salary it is small, but in USA very high.
Yeah.
And maybe this I don't understand in the economic in the in this in this in this district, economic district, maybe, and I don't know why petrol is Ukraine and USA the same price.
Mm. Well, because you were in California, I will say, being in California, we do have the highest
Yeah.
petrol prices in the United States. So,
Yeah.
so it's primarily because we have such a high not only demand, but also we have it's imported because there's a certain grade of element that is required by California. So all this energy that comes in for our vehicles in California are actually from the Middle East. So it costs more here naturally than probably where you're going to go into other parts of the United States with your travels. So you can always take a look at that. And my background is in energy myself. I was on an energy company for a little bit. And what you'll notice is that some days are higher to purchase at the pump than others. Mondays are highest, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays are the highest, but like Tuesdays, Wednesdays are like it dips down. So that's kind of the ebbs and flows of.
Conrad, there's also a tax on the fuel here in the United States that the states receive and the federal government receives, and I'm sure, if Ukraine is anything like Lithuania, they have the value-added tax on the gasoline, and probably other taxes on it too. So the price of getting the oil and refining it is not the greatest cost involved there. The overhead that most refining companies make is about 5 or 10%, whereas the tax is usually in the 20, 30%, 40% range sometimes. So. Yeah, the government takes their share from gasoline. That's a big problem.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know that the enemy, Russia, is, their revenue is, on this war to pay for this war comes out from higher prices on there. So I think it's kind of important to understand that they're choking the Europeans with the supplies, and I think we'll find out more information. Should be interesting what whoever the witnesses are going to be in there. So my question to the three of you ladies, and I typed it into the chat, is while you're here in the United States, what do you want to share exactly besides the documentary? What message do you want to share with Americans?
Maybe I want to ask about Ukraine, about life, all people in Ukraine, because Ukrainian people, it's still for stay for all democratic country for all people. I'm sorry, do you see me?
Yeah, I see you.
Yeah. Okay. And my message about USA can support Ukraine and Ukrainian people, maybe biggest, and because Ukrainian people died, Ukrainian people stay, Ukrainian people fight with terrorist state, Russia, with our soldiers was killed. Killed people, not soldiers. It's only Ukrainian. It's Ukrainian children
Civilians.
and Ukrainian women, and we have a message about support. Now I see before our meet news about new pack of help to Ukrainian. Biden asked about this for President Zelensky, and I have many thanks for this, but this fight with Russia, this our fight, Ukrainian with Europe, with USA, and only Razom.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
remember.
Hey,
Only,
I know Razom, okay, and the colonel knows Razom, so Razom de Poromoi, and
yeah,
so
and
just
only
for this,
Razom go to victory.
yes, and the colonel can agree to this, and you can chime in as well as far as victory is
Yeah, I definitely
what
would
is
like
needed.
to
It's not
chime in.
stalemate. It's not giving up its victory back.
And
Yeah, jump in.
take. I'm sorry, Conrad. We need take this перемога, yeah, this victory, because Russia don't stop. Russia want Poland, want Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, and we need Razum stopped Russia terrorist state.
Absolutely,
To-
absolutely.
to-
So go ahead, Ken.
Totally agree. And we have been blue yellow USA, blue yellow Lithuania. We have been supporting Ukraine since 2014.
Yeah.
And then we have basically contributed over $100 million to Ukraine in the form of drones, medical supplies. We got three medics on the ground right now in Ukraine. They have their own ambulance, and the guys are working as volunteers. Supply them with food and necessities and gasoline and all the supplies. So we know what it's like down on the ground. We have people down there, so you understand that. And in Mariupol, prime example of Ruski Mir and those people who want Ukraine to give up part of their territory That's what you get. Ruski Mir, you get devastated towns that have been totally destroyed, people killed, tortured, maimed, raped, murdered, and you cannot let Putin live. Unfortunately, I think the only question is, because as long as Putin's around, I don't think there will be peace. So it's going to be up to the Russian people to decide that the pain has gotten hard enough that they don't want to have Putin in charge anymore and get rid of him, because that's the only way I see the war ending. As long as Putin's in charge, nothing's going to change. The war will continue even to the last Russian. Their demographic is terrible too, so it's not in Putin's interest to stop, because if he stops, he's dead. So it's a question of who's going to stop him, and I think it's going to have to be Russia.
Yeah. Lydia, you typed it in to us. One of the biggest problems is the survival of people with disabilities during power outages. People who need artificial lung ventilation or who cannot move on their own. And I think that's very important that we as Americans need to understand, is that, the three of you have survived in a war zone. And it's not like you can just go to a store and get some help, go to a hospital to get some help, because the hospitals are being attacked as well. There's a lot of infrastructure that's being attacked by the Russians, and thank you for making that comment in there. It's I think it's critical to understand this, and on a positive note, I think from Ukraine, and I think what I'm inspired by the three of you ladies is your humor, your optimism, your belief in succeeding and hope for the future. And I'm like, being in a war zone for all that period of time, I think people can get miserable and depressed. And I'm just inspired that you're all just could have this sense of morale very high in there. And I think even with all these attacks that come about, so I'm very inspired, and I think the more people that hear your story with your documentary, and I think the Ukrainian innovation that we're going to find out from this commission hearing, and I'm still, if I keep stopping, I'm looking to see when they started it. So I will say that I commend the three of you as far as what you've survived and how you've thrived and in this.
Thank you, Conrad.
Let me see here. Oh, I see some comments in here from people that are watching. So Modest Venture, what can be done? What can be done to encourage EU energy security? It seems like each time the Russians threaten Ukrainian nuclear power plants, it is done in order to discourage any nuclear investment. I think that's probably not a question for us here, but probably for the commission. It seems like it is used to discourage the supply of equipment for Ukraine, while also offering that possibility of cheap energy if you wait a little longer. And basically, it's Russia threatening the EU and Ukraine with a disaster many times worse than Chernobyl. So I think the Kakova Dam attack was also what they're going to try to show their terrorism, and I think that's why they're trying to discourage any type of energy type of investment. So let me check on the okay we're about to jump in.
I want to ask about comments. Yeah, is
Allied policy responses. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 exposed the dangers of the European Union's over-reliance on Russian oil and gas and sparked urgent debates about its need to diversify sources of energy, decarbonize its economies, while ensuring a just transition where all communities will benefit from reliable and affordable energy. In the years since, the EU states have bolstered their energy resilience by more closely partnering with the United States and others to increase their use of liquefied natural gas and renewables. However, the goal of denying Russia vast flows of oil and gas revenue to fund its war on Ukraine remains somewhat elusive. Member states have banned several Russian energy products and invested significantly in enhancing their energy independence. However, Russia continues to take in billions of dollars in oil revenue annually. After nearly 3 years of Russia's war of aggression, the energy situation in Ukraine is dire. Ukraine's ability to produce, store, and transmit power is severely impaired, with far-reaching implications for the Ukrainian war effort and potentially disastrous consequences for the Ukrainian people. In order to defend its territory and to defeat Russia, it is imperative that Ukraine meet its significant and immediate energy needs while also defending and maintaining its energy infrastructure. To help us explore these issues, we will hear from 3 expert panelists. After brief introductions, they will have time to deliver remarks, and then we will have time for questions. Speaking first and on the geopolitics of European energy security, to include a nexus with China, is Dr. Anna Mikulska. Dr. Mikulska is a research staff member at Science and Technology Policy Institute. She has a background in political science, international relations, and law. Prior to joining STPI, she was both a fellow in energy at Rice's University's Baker Institute, where she co-led the program on energy and geopolitics in Eurasia, and a senior fellow at the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Her focus has been on markets for and geopolitics of energy, including the use of natural gas as a economic tool and the role of U.S. exports of liquefied natural gas in the context of domestic and international energy security. Dr. Mikulska's professional interests also include the impact of electoral politics on energy policy and international systems. She holds a doctorate in policy science from the University of Houston, a master's degree in international relations from the University of Windsor in Canada, and a law degree from Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland. Dr. Mikulska speaks Polish, English, German, Farsi, and Russian. Then we will hear from Dr. Joseph Majkut on the initiatives to build out Europe's existing critical energy infrastructure and how coordination among the EU, United States, and others can help curb Russian energy exports. Dr. Majkut is director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In this role, Dr. Majkut leads CSIS's work to understand the geopolitics of energy and climate change, to ensure a global energy transition that is both responsive to the risks of climate change and the strategic and economic priorities of the United States and the world. Dr. Majkut is an expert in climate science, climate policy, and in risk and uncertainty analysis for decision-making. He is frequently cited in trade and national media on the politics of climate change and has testified before Congress on climate change and science. Before CSIS, Dr. Majkut worked as the Director of Climate Policy at the Niskanen Center, where he led efforts to research and promote carbon pricing, low carbon and innovation, regulatory reform, and other market reforms to speed decarbonization. Between 2014 and 2015, he worked in the US Senate as a Congressional Science Fellow, supported by the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the American Geosciences Institute. He holds a PhD from Princeton University in Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences, a master's degree in Applied Mathematics from the Delft University of Technology, and a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Harvey-Mudd College. And finally, Ms. Olga Kokova will offer insights into the current state of Ukraine's energy infrastructure and offer recommendations on how the United States and allies can partner with Ukraine to foster innovation and resilience. Ms. Kokovka is Deputy Director for European Energy Security at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. Ms. Kokovka leads GEC's portfolio on advancing energy security, decarbonization, and competitiveness through cooperation between the United States and Europe. She addresses these issues through in-depth research and high-level convenings. Ms. Kokova frequently appears on the BBC, Bloomberg, CNN, Deutsche Welle, NPR, and Times Radio as a guest commentator. Her work has been published in Barron's, The Economist, Foreign Policy, The New York Times, The National Journal, Politico, and The Washington Post. Before joining the Atlantic Council, Ms. Kokova was a senior program coordinator for the U.S. Energy Association's Energy Technology and Governance Program and a program director for the Climate Plus Energy Project, a clean energy nonprofit in the Midwest. Dr. Mikulska, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here and have the opportunity to revisit what I've been looking at for years now, even before Russia invaded Ukraine. That invasion and events that follow have exposed serious deficiencies in energy security of the European Union and its members. As I have testified a year and a half ago to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources for the hearing that examined the impact of the invasion on European and global energy security, Europe failed on all aspects of energy security and security of supply as defined by its availability, accessibility, affordability, and acceptability. Those deficiencies in energy security were tied directly to EU's overdependence on Russian energy supply and Russia's willingness to use that supply to exert geopolitical pressure. Natural gas has been the most geopolitically sensitive of the fuels due to the need for extensive infrastructure to move its volumes, either via pipelines or as liquefied natural gas through import and export terminals. Russia has known it all too well and has been manipulating supplies to Europe since the winter before the invasion. Ever since, the growth in LNG trade and buildup of LNG infrastructure in Europe has helped in addressing some of the deficiencies. However, the supply still does not match the potential demand needed to avoid energy crisis anywhere in the world in case of major supply disruption or if demand increases based on weather. The supply of LNG globally has been steadily increasing with the US as a major player. This is important since the US LNG volumes are flexible in terms of destination and that's how they can help balance global markets. With no destination clause, any buyer of US LNG can send the fuel anywhere in the world. Oftentimes, the supply goes to whoever can pay the highest price. Since the Russian invasion on Ukraine, Europe has been usually the highest bidder. High prices of energy in Europe have contributed to increase in energy efficiency and strong development of renewables. However, high prices have also contributed to inflationary pressure and decrease in industrial activity and investment. The latter is particularly true for hard-to-abate sectors, such as steel, cement, and glass manufacturing, or fertilizer industry, where natural gas is used. Renewable power has been often seen as more secure in terms of supply, given that it's generated domestically. However, because of its intermittent nature, it cannot yet support the energy system in the same way that traditional energy generation or electricity generation does. In addition, there's the concern of becoming dependent on China for critical minerals and rare earth supply needed for renewable generation. Natural gas, on the other hand, is seen as a good backup for intermittent renewables as it's less emission intensive than coal and its generation is flexible. It can be switched on and off relatively quickly to assist the grid. This natural gas will continue to be an important fuel for Europe. Still, relatively large share of natural gas that Europe consumes comes from Russia. For some countries, especially Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary, Russian gas still comprises majority of natural gas flows via pipeline. Russian pipeline gas supply, especially to those countries, is likely to decrease when Ukraine-Russia transit contract concludes end of this year. This will make even more critical the supply of LNG that reaches Europe. Paradoxically, Russian LNG imports into Europe have been increasing. In fact, they are increasing at the time when all other LNG supplies are decreasing. Given high prices of natural gas, the revenues that Russia state garners from those sales are contributing to Russian economy and its ability to wage war. A recent report by EIA has notably pointed out that Russian gas production has increased 9% year on year in the first 3 quarters of 2024. Similarly, revenues from from sales of oil support Russian state as Russia is able to exploit lack of universal adherence to sanctions as well as the loopholes in those sanctions. Russian oil not only flows via pipeline to some of the EU states, it also is blended into oil coming from other origins, and it's sold either directly or indirectly as refined in other products. The latter is not subject to sanctions. In the meantime, China has become Russia's main energy export destination, particularly for natural gas, which Russia is sending there via pipeline of Power of Siberia 1 and as LNG. With lack of other markets, Russia is becoming dependent on China as a demand center. Those closer ties between Russia and China could become problematic in general, as well as with respect to energy flows. After all, both countries combine the powers of world's major fuel supplier and world's largest energy consumer. This creates potential for geopolitical interference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have the floor.
Thank you, everybody, for having us today. Pleasure to be here with my esteemed colleagues. Noting, of course, that these comments reflect my own opinions, not those of my employer. It's now well known the energy crisis, kicked off by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, reshaped global energy markets, and placed Europe on a new energy trajectory. There's three things I want to highlight for the group today that we've learned from that and are going to affect decision-making going forward. First, Europe managed the loss of Russian gas through a combination of LNG imports, demand reduction, and the acceleration of renewable energy. Oftentimes, we miss the latter two factors in that story from the United States perspective. Second, the financial and infrastructure challenges that transition brought still need resolution today. And finally, there remains to be the need for the U.S. to craft a long-term strategy to address Russia's role in global energy markets to achieve long-term lasting support for Ukraine, as well as larger geopolitical aims. A lot of my comments today are based on a report that we published earlier this year. The title Power Plays, Europe's Response to the Energy Crisis. It's in the materials we shared, and I brought one copy in case anybody's hyper interested. When Russia weaponized its energy exports following the invasion of Ukraine, Europe was forced into an unprecedented test of energy resilience. The scaling here actually matters. Russian fossil fuels made up 1/5 of the EU's energy consumption and quickly dwindled to just now 5% in a matter of a couple of years. That's a really large shock to what usually are relatively stiff systems. A critical part, as we just heard, and I think is becoming more and more well known, was that Europe's survival strategy involved ramping up natural gas imports, particularly LNG from the United States. Between 2021 and 2022, European imports of US LNG doubled, rising from about 30 to 70 billion cubic meters in each year, and most of that coming from Europe. And Europe is now also the primary market for US LNG exports. So the integration is quite large on either side. Buying such large quantities of LNG from global markets required European buyers to pay high prices, peaking in summer 22, but those have now settled to about double pre-crisis levels. At the same time, Europe, I think, made significant strides in renewable energy, and wind and solar projects were expanded dramatically. There were changes to permitting regimes, and that demonstrated that energy transition really can support energy security for energy importing countries. While Europe already had significant renewable generation pre-crisis, the expansion, particularly in solar, deserves note. Renewable capacity also adds up year over year as well. For the 2 years of this energy crisis, Europe added about 3% of its generation needs in solar each year. As that capacity builds, that's expected to reduce the need for gas and coal and power generation going forward. The combination of quick action on LNG imports and the expansion of renewables helped Europe weather the storm and keep the lights on, but that came at a significant cost. The rapid transition away from Russian energy imports cost Europe dearly. The fiscal outlay to shield consumers and firms from the rise in energy prices amounted to $650 billion approximately by mid-2023. Across different European countries, this spending ranged from 1% to 7% of gross domestic product. This is U.S. Department of Defense levels of spending. That's absolutely unsustainable in the long term. The costs of Europe in energy, which are still, again, twice those in the United States, were recently highlighted in Mario Draghi's report, The Future of European Competitiveness, as a threat to industrial competitiveness in Europe. And to address this, the report cited, and I think this is kind of now emerging consensus, Europe will have to invest further in additional infrastructure that will enable decarbonization and reduce energy costs by improving security. Indeed, we now see a lot of that investment happening. New natural gas infrastructure will meaningfully move European countries off of Russian imports for good. For example, the vertical corridor pipeline project in the southeastern part of Europe is going to link gas systems from Greece to Ukraine and will really help, particularly in the case of Moldova and Ukraine, get off Russian gas imports.
Fantastic.
Likewise, the Adriatica pipeline in southern Italy will connect points from North Africa to points beyond in Europe. And the Baltic pipeline connected Poland to Norway and was turned on, I think, very closely to the explosion of Nord Stream 2. The point is, like, a lot of that, I think, is actually happening. The infrastructure necessary to secure long-term energy supplies is being built. Likewise, as those renewables are deployed, we're going to see a need for interconnection and transmission infrastructure similar to the one we're seeing here in the United States. Europe's pursuing expanded transmission capacity with projects like the Biscay Gulf interconnection linking Spain and France, the NewConnect project linking the UK and Germany. I'll note that even more than pipelines, these international connectors actually require a great deal of trust between the countries on either side, because they link to the electricity system on either side, and those things seem to be in constant balance. And so the geopolitics of large-scale and electricity transition actually introduce new dependencies for Europeans that we might not, that are still being sort of probed and well need to be well understood. Lastly, as Europe managed its transition away from Russian energy, Putin's cronies looked elsewhere to sell their stuff. Russian energy is not disappearing entirely from global markets. Russian liquefied natural gas still finds buyers, and the country continues to use oil exports as a source of revenue for domestic and war spending. Russia forecasts that its energy export revenues will indeed increase in 2024, despite the imposition of sanctions, import bans, and the U.S.-led oil price cap on oil exports. The latter of those, I would like to comment on briefly, designed to reduce Russian oil export revenue without spiking global prices. We now see that this price cap is leaking. Colleagues from CSIS recently wrote, and I quote, "Overall, embargoes and price caps have only had a modest impact on Russian state finances. Russia's export volumes have held up thanks to its shadow tanker fleet, and despite crackdowns and pressure on dodgy traders, it's been hard to control activities in dark corners of the oil market that enable Russian export. The reality is," end quote, "the reality is that demand for energy products combined with sophisticated markets means that energy will find ways into global marketplaces. More effective enforcement may help, but the U.S. needs to think strategically about how to contain Russia's influence over global energy markets while providing alternatives for energy importing countries like those in Europe. That means focusing on developing clean energy economies around the world and allowing U.S. export volumes of oil and gas to contribute to well-supplied and less volatile energy markets globally." I'm going to end my comments there. Thank you very much. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And before I pass the floor, I just want to do a little point of order. After we hear Ms. Kokoko's statement, then we will have a microphone available. We invite you to think of questions and take advantage of the fact that you are in the presence of experts who think about these very important and complex things all the time. I'll take a couple questions from the floor, and then we will revert to the panel. Hopefully we'll have a very strong exchange. And with that, I pass the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation, and it's really an honor to be here and join this briefing. Yesterday, October 15th, was the start of the heating season in Ukraine, and possibly the beginning of the most brutal winter since the onset of the full-scale invasion. Ukraine could face a supply deficit that's equal to a third of its peak demand, following Russia's decimation of around 11 gigawatts of power. But with the right coordination and preparation across the transatlantic allies, this worst-case scenario can and must be avoided. Such actions are also essential for protecting and securing European energy security as well. Today also marks the 964th day of this horrific legal invasion. We're coming up to 1,000 days of this assault. Putin's failure to win the war on the battlefield has evolved into this heinous strategy of making Ukraine's bustling, thriving cities unlivable. He plans to accomplish this by taking out critical energy infrastructure, electricity, water, heating, and communication services. Despite Moscow's efforts, though, Ukrainians stayed brave, resilient, and unbroken during this challenging time, of course, with help from allies, including Europe, United States, and others around the globe and their generosity. But 25 major attacks have been recorded over the 2 years, specifically on the energy sector. This assault has progressively intensified in March. Those who have been following this, especially this summer, leaving millions of civilians without power. Blackouts ranging from a couple of hours at the very best to 14 to 16 hours a day. Families are raising children, managing to work, complete their work assignments, cooking, taking care of their sick and elderly with just a couple of hours of electricity a day. Imagine that. But there's a bit of good news too. It's all not doom and gloom. Thanks to the agile and generous responses from Ukraine's allies and bravery of the energy sector workers and the leadership in Ukraine, the country is now finally getting a temporary reprieve from the loss of power. But the situation is extremely fragile. The past patterns of attacks on Ukraine's energy sector strongly suggest that Russia is stockpiling for another mass offensive to launch Ukraine into freezing darkness this winter, particularly by severing connections to the 3 remaining operational nuclear power plants and very likely intensifying attacks on some of the heating systems. Such scenarios go beyond the humanitarian disaster for Ukraine that would be expected if Russia succeeds. It's also an economic and energy security issue for Europe, but also United States. Strong, secure Europe, a strong, massive trade partner for US, that is a benefit for a transatlantic relationship, that is a benefit for United States. Ukraine's energy security is a win for US, is a win for European energy markets as well. And as my previous panelists and speakers have mentioned, rightfully so, European energy systems are deeply interconnected. They don't exist in a vacuum, and they must not be treated as in a vacuum. European integration of its energy markets with Ukraine, including, is part of its strength. It's what keeps European markets competitive. But that also means that we need to protect all aspects of European energy security, including Ukraine. Now, what makes this situation particularly challenging are a couple of external factors that could put further pressure and additional demand on the system. For example, cold snaps, really severe winter, potential technical issues and outages, the insufficient maintenance that did not take place, that should have taken place because Russia has destroyed so much of the infrastructure, regular maintenance could not happen. That could also exacerbate the problems. And of course, the risks of cybersecurity attacks, not just for Ukraine, but Europe and United States as well. For Ukraine, the frequency of those cybersecurity attacks have tripled since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. But again, some serious, horrific situation, but some good news and hope. Together with allies, Ukraine can prepare for Russia's malign actions. We know what to expect, and also some of these additional external scenarios that are really hard to control, or we have absolutely no control over, in terms of the extreme weather events that are on the horizon that could impact the demand. I'm going to outline just a couple of specific opportunities because, yes, I wanted to present how dire the situation is. I also wanted to showcase how Ukraine was able to maintain its energy production, even in this horrific environment, but also being realistic about what's on the horizon. And here are a couple of suggested action items that can ensure that Ukraine survives this winter and thrives, not just this winter, but in the long term. So kind of in the first broader category, just thinking through protection of the remaining infrastructure. The most efficient way to protect the energy sector is preventing the damage in the first place. Providing Ukraine with sufficient air defense to protect remaining critical infrastructure, such as the 3 nuclear power plants and the networks that are interconnected that are near these power plants, would save billions of dollars of reconstruction, rebuilding, and other costs down the road. This is the baseline. Ukraine has also demonstrated incredible innovation in fortification and concealment of smaller scale components of the energy system, hard shell defense for smaller infrastructure, something that's not possible for the really large centralized power plants. Scaling this type of smaller protection is also really important, and with the help of allies, Ukraine can do this across multiple parts of the system. The decentralization of Ukraine's energy system is another key pillar and another pathway for Ukraine to create a resilient strategy to protect its energy sector. How so? So distributed energy systems are much more challenging to destroy for Russia or other malign players versus something that's more centralized. Advancing decentralization at scale will require public-private partnerships, which can be enabled through de-risking mechanisms. DFC can play a key role, and they have played a key role in providing some of those very creative mechanisms. They have contributed significant amounts of money. But again, thinking through on how to drive additional private sector investments, showcasing and supporting specific projects to showcase that there's a way to do this, even in this challenging environment in Ukraine. There's a way to mitigate risk, to work with partners, to be creative. Ukraine is not a monolith. Certain projects closer to the front lines carry higher risks versus in some other parts. And again, protection from cybersecurity attacks, extremely important. It's vital, just as vital as kinetic defense. Allies should support Ukraine in its already very successful efforts, incredible rate of success in reinforcing what I call the cybersecurity shield, if you would. Now, talking through on how to make sure that the right deliveries get to Ukraine on time. One of the issues is funding, unfortunately. It remains key. But Ukraine's Energy Support Fund has been successfully run by the Energy Community Secretariat and has been an exceptionally effective way to garner and channel funding for meeting the most urgent needs in Ukraine's energy sector, procuring equipment as well as spare parts, technical items, different fuels needed to repair infrastructure and maintain heat supply in Ukraine. The fund has received some additional funding from Germany, from the EU. So it's really important that this fund continues to stay full. So that way, especially ahead of this winter, that there's sufficient money there to ensure that procurement can continue smoothly and it doesn't become depleted when Ukraine needs access to this money to repair, replenish, and procure the right parts for its energy system. Moreover, Ukraine and its allies achieved significant progress on expediting the right equipment deliveries to the right locations across Ukraine. Those of you, I'm sure all of you have seen Ukraine on the map. It's huge, and making sure that the right communities get the right parts that are, have unique specs is really, really important as quickly as possible. By building out relationships with communities on the front lines, especially donors in different countries or multilateral donors can better understand the unique needs of the different communities in Ukraine. For example, this combined heat and power units, getting them to the right locations as quickly as possible, making sure there's reliable backup options, including liquefied petroleum gas, LPG heaters, wood stoves, and other solutions. There has been progress made, and this has expedited how quickly deliveries come to Ukraine to the right places, but there's still room to grow. And then finally, repairing, rebuilding, and replacing equipment. So ramping up production of critical energy equipment in Europe and United States would create a much needed strategic reserve of crucial system equipment. So thinking through it in a more holistic way, not just for Ukraine, but for all of the transatlantic energy systems. This will address a broader transatlantic strategy component shortage on our hands today that we're facing, not just in Ukraine, but in Europe, in the United States. One example, Ukrenergo, Ukraine's energy system operator, is making good progress in accumulating a stock repair equipment. So they're accumulated 3 times of what's usually needed. But these are unprecedented times. 3 times might not even be enough. So really going on the extremes and preparing for the worst. Another strategy is optimizing exports from Europe. Optimizing electricity imports from Europe, which will of course reduce the need
and the pressure to produce more energy at home. Before the full-scale invasion, even at times during the last couple of 2 years and a half, Ukraine has securely exported power to neighboring European nations. Incredible, in the midst of the war. Now imports from Europe will play a crucial role in keeping the lights on, anticipating about 1.7 gigawatts of electricity to be imported from Europe by Ukraine in the near future. Expanding this interconnections with Europe and especially Moldova, and securing also Moldova's energy system because of how closely it's intertwined, a very key strategy here. And I spoke a little bit about de-risking investments, so just kind of driving that point home. Again, finding ways to encourage private sector engagement in Ukraine. I'll give you one example. Ukraine has massive gas storage capacity, and it has been utilized by traders even during the full-scale invasion without any kind of de-risking or insurance. But Russia noticed that and attacked these facilities. To none of their success, they kept the gas flowing safe. They were able to deliver the gas. But Russia did this to discourage Europe and European traders from storing their gas in Ukraine's vast natural gas facilities into the future. But the resilience of these facilities has been clearly demonstrated, and Europe should offer, and US should offer de-risking mechanisms to encourage future traders, European private sector companies and others to store gas in Ukraine. This also has positive economic implications for Ukraine as well. And finally, just a couple of last points. The occupied territories must not be forgotten. For example, international communities must prioritize efforts to prevent a nuclear disaster in occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Multiple safety violations and near misses have been recorded to date near this plant, signaling that an incident is of high probability and it's just a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. The control of the plant must be given back to Ukraine in the best case scenario. At the very least, it must be given to someone to non-Russian forces to ensure the safety, whether it's a neutral party, but we do need to pay more attention to what's happening in Zaporizhzhia. Even if it's giving control to more of a neutral party, even if it's not, at the very worst case, non-Ukrainians operating it. With Russians operating it and occupying it, we're just watching a slow motion of a disaster on the horizon. And to finish a bit of a more positive note, look, Ukraine is in a challenging situation right now, but it must not be viewed as a victim. It should be viewed as a partner in Europe, a partner who can help Europe build a low carbon, resilient, secure energy system. The country is a source of best practices for resilience and recovery, decentralization, and cybersecurity defense. And as Europe and US face, unique challenges at home that are, of course, different from what's going on in Ukraine, but seeing what's happening with hurricanes and other threats to the energy system, even cybersecurity threats, there are a lot of similarities. We can take those skills and we can take best practices and utilize those skills. This will be extremely helpful. We're at an inflection point right now about Ukraine's energy future, and we know what the risks are. Russia has shown its true colors, its face, what it's capable of. We know what the threats are. We know exactly what to do to prevent them, to mitigate them, to make sure that Ukraine, as I mentioned earlier, can be a thriving hub for innovation, clean and low carbon energy production, can support European energy security. But first, it must survive this winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to each of our panelists. There's been some reports that have additionally been mentioned in some of the comments. Those will be posted to our website with the testimonies that you've given shortly, so everyone can be able to follow along and be able to look up that additional information. We heard we're going to have a staff person here with a microphone, so if you would like to prepare your questions, someone will be right. Thank you so much. Someone will be right with you. We heard a lot about the costs and interconnectivity and the dire condition under which Ukrainians are living, but also the 2 times the energy costs that our European friends and allies are living with, and the real geopolitical crisis that Russia's full-scale invasion has precipitated, exposing all these weaknesses in Europe's over-reliance on gas and how to move to not only a more sustainable future, but certainly a one that is less invested in helping Russia to fund its war against Ukraine. With that, I pause a minute and then I'll turn it to the floor. So if anybody would like to take questions, we'll probably get 1 or 2, and then we can turn it back to our panelists for some discussion. Please. Yes, he's bringing it over. Please, I'll turn off the microphone here.
If anybody that's watching our show.
All right, look at that. No, I feel very improvised. Yeah, I'm Paul Massaro. I'm the staff director of the Helsinki Commission.
Hey, it's Paul.
My question's for Dr. Majkut. Sorry, but last name is wrong. But you mentioned the U.S. sanctions and I guess really the coalition sanctions on Russian energy. I mean, we've tried to run these to ground on multiple occasions, trying to understand sort of what's happened here because, I mean, certainly by the metrics, they seem to have essentially failed. I mean, if our mission was to bankrupt Russia, we haven't. But by any stretch of the imagination, we haven't.
We haven't tried hard enough.
And I guess the question is the design flawed? Was it not going to happen to begin with? I mean, there's been this thinking of, well, we're trying to get Russia actually to sell as much as possible at the lowest price possible, and we're going to. I mean, just when I hear even myself say that, it's kind of like, really, that was our goal. I mean, so I guess you'd mentioned, I think, what has been told over and over and over again, which is we've tried to balance stability in global markets with bankrupting Russia. But I mean, it seems like we've either misunderstood this or wildly prioritized stability in global markets to the point that, I mean, Russia doesn't seem to have even taken much of a hit. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'd like to know. So thank you.
No, they have taken the hit, but.
Yeah, I mean, altering oil markets is a tricky thing to do because as a commodity, oil is very fluidly, pun intended, exchanged, right? And while I think there is plenty of evidence that early on the price cap or other sanctions did have an effect on Russian oil export revenues, that just the industry has found ways around that. Like Russian exporters have created a shadow fleet. It's like ships that don't work through the standard insurance programs and other things. And that is going to be part of the reality. So that is the reality of how this has worked. So what do we do? One, we can work around the edges to make it work a little better, right? You could look at higher levels of insurance requirements and verification at critical shipping points, right? Turkey tried to do this, and then favoring global market stability, we said, well, maybe we can be a little bit more lax. So like, as we look for options to kind of create additional pressure now, that's one option. I can send you the piece that we wrote that has a couple others, but the reality is like market demand will be met. And so when we think about what a longer term strategy is going to be, it's probably finding other suppliers or reducing global demand so that we can create additional pressure on Russian exports without causing undue economic harm elsewhere. And that's why like fluid U.S. oil exports are helpful. If OPEC or Saudi Arabia decides to increase supply, that would actually like potentially reduce prices and cause trouble for Russia's war economy. But it really at some point we need to have some sort of view on what we want the global supply balance to look like and how we're going to manage that over the long term.
Please do. And if you'd kindly state your name and your affiliation before you speak. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your expertise today. My name is Isabella Baker. I'm with the CSIS, A few other countries have been mentioned in this discussion, Moldova particularly, Turkey more recently. I'm curious what efforts have been made or what efforts can be facilitated as to regional energy security in the Black Sea region, in Ukrainians' neighborhood.
Well, I think there have been already efforts that are important, and that includes the LNG terminals that have started to function in Southern Europe. Right, so these ones are important for the security of supply in Southern Europe. Especially the Greek terminal, I think for Moldova might be important, as I think Joseph mentioned before. For Turkey, it's a little bit more complicated. I don't think Turkey has an issue with security of supply. In fact, it's been developing a system within which it becomes almost a place where the supply ends up being delivered and then distributed, sort of a hub, and that includes supply from Russia. Right, so there has been a recent even announcement that potentially BOTAS, the Turkish state company, will start mixing its oil, have a new blend, Turkish blend, which will include up to 40% of Gazprom's of Russian, sorry, this was gas, of gas, and mixed with Gazprom's gas. So that's something that Turkey has been actually in many ways using to increase its ability to be the regional gas hub, and potentially profit both politically, but also one could think of geopolitical profits that Turkey could basically have being in that situation between both worlds.
This also speaks to the need for Europe and EU specifically to have a broader enforceable strategy about the future of Russia's LNG and natural gas. Right now, the gas that's not going to Europe, the reasons for reductions is Russia. Putin was the one who stopped the exports, not European sanctions or laws. Right now, there are some restrictions on being able to do transshipments for LNG, but overall, LNG and gas and piped gas can come legally into Europe. There is no enforceable date. There's no enforceable deadline for phasing those out. So if Europe and EU specifically is serious about clarity, to creating transparency, what's coming through Turkey, what's coming through Azerbaijan and other Central Asian countries to Europe, there needs to be a clear timeline to say by this date, this is how much we want to see or not see some of the pipe gas. This is what we want to see on Russian LNG. This strategy right now does not exist, which makes it more confusing for private sector investors to figure out how they can play into the European market if they don't know that there's a certain phase-out date deadline for Europe and Russian gas relationship.
Perhaps I can use my privileged position as the moderator to ask a question or two myself. One of the conditions of being able to try to make European energy more secure and more resilient is obviously a shift away from carbon in general, or Russian gas in particular. But one of the things that you mentioned, Ms. Kakovka, is the decentralization and kind of hubs and smaller systems, making the system itself by design, infrastructurally speaking, more resilient. Where is European thinking in terms of this ability to look at building out infrastructure in that way, and also the ability to of our European friends, if you could project to let's say sustain the kind of increases in prices as they have, as they figure out this transition? Will the transition come in whatever form it comes quickly enough to be able to meet the public's expectations and as well as their energy security needs? Perhaps I'll start with you. Thank you.
Sure, and you've hit on something that's exactly the answer here too, is the reason for Ukraine's decentralization versus in Europe. You know, in Europe, yes, it's energy security is important aspect of decentralization, but it's decentralization in Europe broadly is driven by the need to decarbonize, while trying to do that competitively. While in Ukraine, it's very much driven by how do we physically, secure our energy sector. Now, I think in the future, if Europe can build out a system that's both, that's the end goal. But even in peaceful times, even in Europe, that's not in the broader European and EU, that's not being bombed every day. It is a challenging, and in the United States, it is a challenging task in peaceful times to decentralize a massive system. I've heard energy experts refer to this. This is such a great comparison of trying to build out a smaller highway road system while you're still using the main highway, and then somehow encouraging the cars to kind of veer off. And I mean, it is extremely complex, but there is a way to do it with the right strategies and the right upgrades to the grid, the right built out of the grid. But it's a lot of financing. It's a lot of money. The Draghi report was mentioned a few times, and I think we can all agree that it's the financing gap that's really a massive concern. And part of that financing is building out the energy infrastructure that's going to take us to the decentralized systems that we want to see in Ukraine and across Europe.
If I can add, I think it's actually a really great point. And one thing that Europe is doing is it's developing its renewables, which are much more decentralized or can be decentralized. The other part is SMR, so small modular nuclear reactors, right? That we're thinking about as part of the decentralizing potentially if once they get employed in Europe or otherwise. But that's something that we're trying to figure out. What I wanted to underscore is something we've talked about when I was still at the Baker Institute, and we were talking about what is energy security, right? And energy security, we were talking about how important it is to decentralize and also diversify a supply. However, what actually decarbonization does, it does the opposite. It actually puts everything into a grid, into electricity, exactly directly opposite to diversifying as the electricity reaches the demand points. Yes, there's some diversification in terms of the generation, but at the end, everything is in a system that could be attacked, both physically, but also as through cyber attacks. And that's when the decentralization might be extremely important to achieve. So once the system is attacked, it doesn't necessarily roll through different countries because, as Joseph has mentioned, those countries are, in Europe in particular, are becoming increasingly interconnected with respect to electricity.
Right. Yeah, maybe I kind of take a step back, right? Like Europe was already aiming to do a relatively rapid transition away from fossil fuel use. Like there was some kind of sense and a lot of public rhetoric, right? This emergency happened, like, well, now they're going to change all, get rid of those unrealistic plans. No, like Europe now is the prices are incentivizing transition in a way that they didn't necessarily before. The tasks ahead are relatively straightforward. They're not necessarily easy, right? Building enough interconnection that you can build a high renewable system, finding a way to do storage to deal with like daily or weekly or monthly shortfalls in generation. The European Union is like slightly different from the US, where when we build electricity transmission, we want it to go east to west. They want it to go north to south because it's very sunny in the Mediterranean, it's very windy in the north, and those two can kind of help balance each other over a long time. Now, what can the US do? The US can definitely help by investing in technology and sharing the technology, the learnings that we do, whether it's small modular reactors, whether it's like digital services, demand reduction techniques, like those are all things that are relatively shareable between developed economies. There's some role for the state in helping enable that, but it's largely the U.S. Letting our firms innovate and take their innovations abroad. The other thing we can do is make sure that we are providing adequate energy supply to the extent we can, whether that's continuing to export LNG, supply oil to global markets. There's a future role for hydrogen that the Europeans see as a big part of their energy security strategy. To the extent the U.S. is going to be a maker or a supplier of that hydrogen, we should work together to make sure whatever we're producing meets the environmental and other standards that are going to be set in Europe and are part of their energy security story.
I don't mean to hog the mic. I just you said the magic words, the magic letters, which is SMRs. I'm just wondering. I actually have two quick things, and the first is, are SMRs real? Because they constantly get brought up as some kind of miracle solution, and I've never seen one. And I mean, they always just seem like fantasy technology to me, or else like right on the precipice but never quite there sort of things. And then the second thing, I guess, because we were talking about the decarbonization thing, I sort of take exception with the idea that Europe they were saying they were decarbonizing, sure. But I mean, Germany shut down its nuclear power plants.
Right.
You know, I mean, nuclear is like zero carbon technology. You know, the idea here was to buy a huge amount of cheap Russian gas, you know, to basically, you know, run the system off purchasing from corrupt gas from Russia. And when that was no longer an option, they went back to coal. I mean, yeah, I mean, these aren't exactly like low carbon, you know, fuels. So I mean, I guess it's confusing to me to hear like, oh, they're heading this way, or they were doing it anyway, or something like this. But because to me, it's like, actually, if they were serious about this, they would have been investing in nuclear a long time ago, when the only one that did was France, which did it not out of decarbonization reasons, but out of energy independence, you know, great France sort of reasons, which, you know, were different than all this other kind of stuff. So, I mean, is Germany now going to re-embrace nuclearization? Is nuclear going to come back? Or, because, I mean, you make that face, but I mean, are we serious about this or not? I mean, there just feels like this almost like foundational silliness to this, that we've got the Greens in government burning lignite and coal.
Well, there's a lot
It's
there.
a fantastic
Does someone want to
question.
start with
I'm glad he
this?
I
asked.
mentioned the
Please.
SMRs.
Honestly,
I'll go ahead.
We're delighted you did. Please.
I think there is something to it, although yes, indeed the SMRs are kind of still always like one step behind of what we are hoping. I believe there is one SMR working or close to working in China. So there, again, please do not quote me on this, but there are there is some movement, right, on the horizon, I believe. However, when it comes to the clean energy, decarbonization of energy in Europe, I think there is a lot to it, and particularly in Germany, I think there was this kind of idea, well, let's run on cheap Russian gas until we can actually really decarbonize through renewables based on some type of technological breakthrough that we're gonna have. For sure, we're gonna have, right? But until then, let's run it directly from Russia under the Baltic Sea, and you know, and get that gas in a cheap way. Exploit Russia, because Russia will depend on us. Little did they know, Russia thought the opposite, right? And Russia was able to actually call the bluff in many ways by cutting, as Olga has mentioned, by cutting supply to Europe. Europe has not cut supply from Russia. I mean, it's the opposite, exact opposite. So in terms of nuclear power, and I've looked at it at some point in Germany, there has been the movement against nuclear through actually Greens that's been happening in Germany since 1970s. It's much deeper than we can think of within the last 3-4 years or so. It's been underscored by the Chernobyl, disaster, and later on. Going forward, access to gas kind of allowed Germany to think outside the box of the nuclear box, and that's kind of what it actually, the nuclear was taken out by law. In fact, Germany has extended its nuclear power plants by 4 months till
till April, even though it was supposed to shut it down in December, based on the energy security consideration as a backup power, interestingly enough, which is nuclear is known not really for a backup ability, right? But it has extended and then it shut it down. It's unclear whether or not Germany had actually fuel to be able to keep those power plants alive at that point, because nuclear fuel is also not easy to come by, and most of the nuclear fuel that Germany has been buying has been from Russia. So here we have this kind of a system that is truly, relying on Russia, not only on natural gas, but also on the things that could back it up. When it comes to nuclear power, I think in Europe in general, France actually has not been investing in nuclear power. A lot of the issues that France has had over the last 3 years because of Russian invasion, it has with the working of its old nuclear reactors that they actually have now to reboot, because they weren't building new ones to sustain them, because there was this idea of renewable power and potentially natural gas supporting their system as well. Where the nuclear power could have potential impact will be places like Poland, for example, which is trying to build not one but potentially more of nuclear facilities, and with the US. And it's right on the border with Germany, really. So I'm not sure what Germany is gonna actually gain besides the fact that Poland will potentially be sending some of the nuclear power, hopefully once it's built, to Germany. It will take time, however.
Yeah. Amongst the mysteries of the universe that one should not try to explain is German nuclear policy. But it's a large integrated market, and so look for other places that are supportive. Poland is interested in building, with U.S. support, large nuclear reactors of the kind we just finished at Vogel. That seems like it's going to go forward. There's a small SMR project that has U.S. support being destined for Romania. And then Ukraine, to the extent that it is interconnected with Europe and joining the common market, is can be a large source of nuclear power as well. They've got the workforce, they've got a security environment. Well, they had a security environment that was relatively hospitable, and so those are places where I think it's just more productive to look.
And just to add 2 sentences on SMRs, yes, real technology, but the reason why we can't just simply ignore it is because China's going to build them regardless at scale. So the question is this another race we're willing to, another tech race that we're willing to lose to China if we don't step on the gas and think through a way to do this in a way where it's all about how to do this cost competitively in a way where it's not just, one-off react. Yeah, the first ones are going to be complex. There's going to be setbacks. We mentioned several countries that are moving forward in this: Czechia, Slovenia, and others, even some Baltic countries. This has been a wake-up call. So even when Germany is already reconsidering nuclear, that's serious. So it's a missed opportunity to not have a cohesive strategy on nuclear across Europe. It is a missed opportunity. However, it will be extremely important to then, once new technologies like SMRs, like 1 or 2, get built, that there is a cohesive regulatory environment that makes it easier, so you don't have to go through the hoops of certifying in multiple member states, and that's going
Absolutely.
to be
The policy is usually not the technology. It's often the issue that ends up killing some of the technologies at the end, unfortunately. And actually, part of the SMR is Russia also is developing its own SMRs, and they are close. In addition, most of the fuel that actually would fuel SMR would come from Russia. So there is a point of developing alternative SMR fuels supply centers, because we probably should not be in the same situation that Europe found itself when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Thank you. I think some of the things that I'm hearing as we're talking, there's a lot going on with policy recommendations, with realities on the ground, geopolitical, and also technological, not only innovations, but complexities. I'm hearing that this war of aggression is heightening an awareness of interconnectivity, not only within Europe, but across Europe, and certainly drawing in the United States in terms of our ability to be part of the solution with innovation, with business possibilities, investments, with energy supplies. But I'm hearing also that as we work forward on this nearly 3 years in, and certainly in 2014, after the purported invasion, annexation of Crimea, we're still lacking really cohesive longer-term strategies as the community writ large. And we're still grappling very mightily with this. And I think from the United States perspective, we do understand, and we have to understand, and I'm glad that you're here today to tell us and double down on the fact that Europe whole, free, and at peace with the lights on is in the United States' best interest. And when we can have a role in supporting that, we should. And certainly we need clarity. And I was thinking about clarity. We need clarity from the national priorities, whether we're balancing, comfort and cost. We need clarity from a perspective of how the business environment is working, whether it's how sanctions work and public-private partnerships, and how that helps and encourage innovation and engagement. I think that we have to be clear about Russia's aims, and Russia's not pulling any punches when it says that it wants to dismantle Ukraine. So we have to be very clear, because they're clear and they're letting us know. And I think also it would be remiss if I didn't bring it back to the clarity of the righteousness of the Ukrainian position of self-defense, and to try not to be completely dismantled and taken over by its neighbor. And it is fighting right now, not only for its existence, but also trying to also, again, you said partnership with Europe and allies, and we need to energy security. It comes to the root of some of this geopolitical fundamental questions about how we live and work and exist together in a community of nations that respects rule of law and wants to do business and wants to innovate and wants to look forward to the future. So on those couple of points of clarity, I offer it perhaps back to, maybe we'll go in reverse order. Can I offer the floor back to you for final thoughts and reflections before we close today?
Final point, we need to get off our back foot and be constantly on offense. Starting from COVID, starting from multitudes of Russians invasions, not just in Ukraine, but Chechnya invasions and takeover of territories in Moldova, Georgia. We have been on our back foot. We have been reacting, responding to threats from malign players such as Russia, in cases sometimes China. We, responding to global events such as COVID, which was really extremely impossible to predict. So we need to look ahead and ask ourselves, how do we develop a proactive strategy? And instead of letting people like Putin drive the energy security policy in Europe, for the United States, for Ukraine, how do we drive a vision that we want? We have the tools, we have the capabilities, we have the innovations, we have the resources. The question is, do we have the political will?
Good point. Good point.
Thank you for having us today. I think I'll just remind everyone that the sort of the transition we saw in Europe was multifaceted. I think that's just important to remember. There's things we can learn from it in terms of the speed of permitting, allowing both necessary infrastructure to be built really quickly, but over a long time to reduce costs. And it's important to remember that the U.S. now plays this sort of vital global energy security role that was super helpful in the case of Europe. And we don't really know what crisis lies around the corner, but maintaining our ability to do that was clearly helpful in this case, and I think will be in the future as well.
I think for me, the whole lesson from what we went through since the world has gone through, since the invasion of Russia on Ukraine, is that energy security is important. It's important for everybody. It's important also for Western Europe, which oftentimes before seemed to forget about it. We've often been taking for granted that we can actually switch the switch and the lights will go on. This is not the reality of many people in Ukraine, but also other places in the world where it's just not enough energy for people to access. And they value any energy independent of the source in the absence of it. And I think that the fact that we are talking about energy security is important because it will help us to understand not only the realities of the developed world, but also the developing world, which may make or break our energy transition. If there is not energy security for people of India, of Southeast Asia, and other places, Africa, or so on, we will not be able to expand our transition to different fuels and to cleaner energy and so on. And maybe that's a lesson that the developed world can take, that energy security is important. Doesn't matter how well developed you are, and energy access is vital for everybody in the world. Thank you.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end it on. Thank you so much for reminding us that we're in the driver's seat. We have to lead. And honestly, these issues are vital. It's been a pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for your time and testimonies. And this meeting is closed. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Very long discussion. It was normally these hearings, you can see the camera on the person and on the witness at the same time. Colonel, you have any comments to start with? You're on mute.
Yeah, very interesting. The energy is a weapon nowadays. That's, people don't seem to realize that, but it is a weapon. It's also the biggest. Okay, I was watching on YouTube, so we get an echo. No, it is a weapon, and people use it. Putin was going to use it and starve Europe to death, and everybody was going to freeze and eat their little hamsters and everything else, but it didn't work out that way. So we've gotten around it. The free market system's gotten around it. The biggest buyers of Russian oil, not gas, but Russian oil, is China and India. And those two countries need to have the pressure put on them. They're buying this oil at a very significant 30-40% discount. And they're shipping them on these unregistered, unlicensed tankers. And, we mentioned this, we talked this before. Anybody in the legal profession could probably find good ways of stopping these sales in India and China. If there's lawyers that are willing to go there, finance their trips, and say, okay, based on the damage that Russia has done and the findings of the international courts, that Russia will be responsible for the damage done to Ukraine. Here's part of our thing we'd like to collect. And why not seize those vessels in port, or at least tie them up legally? And with the legal systems that they have over there, I'm sure it can be done. So maybe that'll stop that sale, because the Indians are basically in the refining business too. The Chinese use the oil internally, but the Indians are in the refining business, and they refine that oil and, by the way, sell it back to Russia, which kind of puts a crimp in the campaign to deprive Russia of their oil to do the war. If their tanks don't have gasoline or diesel, they're not going to move anywhere. If their trucks don't have fuel, they're not going to bring up supplies. That is the best way, one of the best ways to end that war. If you deprive Russia of fuel, you're doing it. But the Ukrainians need to keep hitting the refineries, not necessarily the oil depots, but then the get around, the workaround by the Russians is to sell the oil to India and then buy it back as a refined product. So the Indians are making out like bandits on this situation, and that's unfortunate. So the other thing you mentioned there is small, medium reactors. Canada is really ahead of this thing. Those things are small, compact, very, very, very safe, very reliable. A lot of companies working on it. I got to work with Lithuania a little bit on the energy sector as head of the economics commission there. And yeah, energy was a big thing. Lithuanians pay over 40 cents a kilowatt hour. I don't know what it's like in California. Here in Arizona, it's 8 cents a kilowatt hour.
Hmm.
And I don't pay any of that because I have solar panels.
Oh. Right. Right.
They actually pay me. So, you know, my electric bill is non-existent, and it actually makes me a little bit of a profit. So the thing is, the energy sector and why Putin wants the Donbass. That's the biggest coal mining area in Ukraine, right? Am I right, girls? The Donbass area has got coal, it's got uranium, it's got all kinds of precious metals and semi-precious metals that the Chinese have a monopoly on, and depriving the Ukraine of the Donbass is a tremendous hit economically for Ukraine.
Well, yeah, and neon. There's which countries have it? It's Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and China are the only 4 countries that have neon, and neon's important because neon is used to with making chips and semiconductors on there. So as a natural resource,
besides lighting up Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, there you go. Right. You know, I think it's important that we have, like the panelist said, is have a partner with Ukraine. You know, as a U.S., you know, we should have a partner. Having this question here, why should Americans care about Ukraine energy policy? What's at stake here? It's economics, and I think economics and humanitarian efforts, and you know, having, you know, Ukrainian energy. I think it's important to keeping our prices low. Ukrainian, you know, agriculture keeps global prices for agriculture and food low, and you know, Russia has destroyed that stuff. So I think it's definitely important for us there. Let me see. Albina has typed in a couple things in here. Albina, do you want to ask the? I'm looking at your comments here. Do you want to go over that briefly about the blackout schedules? The blackout schedules that you have. I can read it.
Yeah, why don't you read it, Conrad?
Maybe Conrad, read you.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. For one thing, we mostly live on blackout schedules. That is, when there is light, we try to charge all gadgets, power banks, charging stations. We cook and bathe when there is light. We do not turn on heavy electrical appliances during peak load hours in the morning and in the evening when everyone is going to work or returning from work. Many have their own separate electrical devices that store electricity when it is available and supply it when it is not. For example, I freeze a bottle of water with ice to the refrigerator to keep it food cold. All coffee shops, cafes, restaurants, medical clinics, absolutely all small and medium-sized businesses have their own generators. Large enterprises build their own separate power stations. At home, I have many candles, flashlights, lamps, various devices that give light. Also, some residential high-rises have bought industrial generators. Industrial generators to power at least the elevator when there is no light.
Wow.
That is a well-stated comment as far as giving people the picture, because I think here in America, we don't have that perspective of what is going on and what daily life is like, and how you describe that all. That should be eye-opening to anybody that has no understanding of what's going on, has no concept of what's going on, and I think I have Mariupol's 2 trailer up here, and we can play that. It's about a minute, so let me just cue it up on here.
Ну, чуєте? Чуєте. Конрад,
Yeah.
я зараз хочу сказати від себе і дуже попрошу свою доньку Альбіну, щоб вона це переклала.
My mama want ask your opinion, and I try translate this,
Sure.
but I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead. No.
we've spent time together, and I can understand the idea. So don't, if it's not word for word, it's okay. I think I have an idea, and I'll use a little Google Translator again.
Her mom's got some questions, I think, for you, and she'll translate.
Yeah.
А потім я попрошу свою доньку, щоб вона переклала мені вашу реакцію на те, що я скажу.
I will translate, try translate our answer for your question.
Те, що я чула тільки що у розмові в Конгресі, і те, про що ви говорите зараз, я не почула нічого, а може пропустила про Донеччину. Чи було таке, чи ні? Була розмова про Донеччину? Саме про Донеччину.
Well, in Congress and in our answer, we ask about Donetsk region.
Are you so are you asking about Congress specifically, or are you talking about us here? Let me type it in.
Because my mom live in Donetsk region, and it is specific region for electric, for generate, and she want to ask about this region.
I would say whatever she deals with on a daily basis, whatever she wants to share. So
I think we're not understanding the question here. Why don't we type it in? Type in the question in Ukrainian, and we'll use Google Translate.
Yeah.
Переклади мені.
I understood the question totally differently, so I don't.
Okay. So, what did you think the question was?
She was asking something about our different regions in energy policy.
Different regions in energy policy.
Pravda.
One second, please.
У кого? Давай мені скажеш, я напишу його, а вони його перекладуть. Ні, я хочу його сказати. Аль, допоможи мені. Я як людина, яка і останній час теж перебувала на війні, там, де війна йде вже 10 з половиною років, на Донеччині, хочу сказати, що всі ті проблеми, які були озвучені по Україні, на Донеччині навіть не вважаються проблемами. Хоча я розумію, наскільки це важливо для України. Бо за 10,5 років і останні 1,5 роки на Донеччині я не бачила зовсім, щоб приїжджали і вирішували якісь комісії і місії на Донеччині енергетичні питання. Так, їх вирішує ДТЕК. І я розумію, що за допомогою і Америки, і інших стран світу. Але, вибачте, ми тоді напишемо.
Maybe my mom has many different things, and we try write text on the chat. Okay?
Okay.
На жаль, я не
Sorry.
знаю англійської, на жаль.
Okay, we'll try and text. That's okay.
Type it up, and we'll try to answer that.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. What we'll do is also let me just play their trailer to their production of the documentary Panelists 2.
Okay.
So let's
while they type it up, we can do that.
Yeah.
Она ему глаза говорит, я не знаю, что с ним делать.
Да я ж не хозяин. Давайте встанем, помолимся. Господь, милосердие, милость Твоя, она обновилась и в это утро для нас. Утро доброе, Господь.
Let me see here.
Was that the trailer?
Yeah. Let's see. That's what I pulled up. My apologies. I mean, for a perspective on what's going on, as Albina described it earlier, with being all hunkered down and in let me see this. Okay, I got the wrong one. I apologize. Here we go.
Да, это не игрушки, не смех. Это смерть.
Хрупкую руку Твою, Господь, поручаем и души их, и наши тела.
Okay, she's typing away furiously on her phone there. So
yeah. Mom, that's probably a really good question or comment. So, but for those who have not seen the Mariupolis 2 documentary, it's important for you to see it if you want to know more exactly what's going on the front.
Conrad, where's it available to see for those of us that don't live near a big city, like LA or Chicago or New York? We live in the provinces of Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there plans to put it on YouTube or?
I guess that's a question for the ladies here, if it's available. But the ladies that are here are touring the United States, showing the documentary throughout the country. And if you wanted to show it to your city, to your community, reach out to us and we'll put you in connections to see what we can do.
Okay.
And I think it's important.
Very important that people see this, and the commercial aspect of it is I understand that, but the getting the message out is the most important thing of what this movie has to say. It's not getting awards or anything else like that, but getting the message out to the people of the United States, who we have to admit sometimes have a very short attention span and short memory, because we're all getting used to seeing so many atrocities and committed by the Russians, and no longer gets people angry. It's just, that's just what they do. We got to get this movie out to as many people as possible. Okay, did she send anything?
Yeah, let me see. Okay, I see what Mama was asking me.
Okay, how come I don't see it?
Well, yeah, it's on the phone. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I got this. In most of Donetsk region, where the war has gone on for 10.5 years, people have generally forgotten what gas, heat, light, water, etc. are. Are the issues of aid specifically for Donetsk region being considered? I'm not sure. That's a good question as far as from Congress. So, I mean, do you have any idea, Cassis, if it's in a package about energy relief, or is that more of an EU thing?
That'll probably be more of an EU thing, and probably done with confiscated Russian funds. The whole thing, though, is before they can do anything with the Donetsk region, they have to take it back. And that means somehow or another getting the Russians out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to send aid to Donetsk unless it's North Korea and China, or Iran. Right. So, yeah, it's an energy-rich region. It's got a lot of potential, and that's why I think one of the reasons Putin wanted it. It's not because there were Russian speakers there. That's a BS excuse of any. From what I understand, most Ukrainians spoke Russian. A lot of Lithuanians I know spoke Russian, but they did not want to be rescued by the Russians because they were Russian speakers. Right. I studied a little bit of Russian, so I'm a Russian speaker, and I need to be rescued by Putin.
Yeah, it seems in the Baltics, it's if you're under the age of 30, you probably don't know Russian, but if you're over the age of 30, you probably
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way in the Baltics, and I think maybe a little bit,
absolutely, yeah,
a little bit younger in Ukraine, and obviously the more east that you go, the more Russian and Ukrainian language they speak.
Yeah. No, the energy things we mentioned, the SMRs, these are very neat things that Canadians have been working on for years, and they have units, but nobody's taken them on full steam yet. They're small units, very portable, very easy to get around. They're very safe, and that's something that people need to look into. I was looking into it at one time for Lithuania because they, basically you put up one of these units and it provides power and electricity for a whole city, a whole town or a whole village, and the cost is very minimal. It's not that expensive, and like I said, they are portable. They can be moved around and set up in no time and hooked up to the grid. Now, the Ukrainians, from what I understand, had a pretty well fortified grid because the Russians, expecting war at one time, and while they were occupying Ukraine, managed to put a lot of these facilities into hardened areas and hardened them. But I guess that, with enough bombing, that breaks down too. So it's like a dam, you hit it once, it won't crack. You hit it 5 or 7 times, and pretty soon you'll have a flood. So the energy policy, I mentioned earlier that the Israelis can knock Iran out of the world economy in maybe 6 months if they take out their export facility. It's all done on one little island, and it's very vulnerable, very easily to knock out. But then, look at the map and see what waterway the Iranians control, and any other oil shipments going through there would probably be at risk from the Ukrainians. So that's why I doubt if the Israelis will do that. Energy, ties the whole world together, and like I said, it's also a weapon. And that weapon has to be denied to the Russians and given to basically the Ukrainians. And it can be done.
So I got a response from Irina on she really wants to talk about aiding Donbass,
okay,
and aiding the region, and I think it's important. As far as not only the return of Donbass and but also the rebuild, and I think it's important. I think that should be definitely U.S. policy, not only to succeed but also in the rebuild. With the seizure of Russian assets.
They're there, and I think eventually that's going to come about. Right now, they're getting the interest from these loans. Unfortunately, I think in the European Union, the Hungarians blocked that initiative. Don't know if they'll be overturned when the presidency changes, but that initiative for using the 50 billion in interest from those seized Russian assets. But the Donbass, most of those quote unquote separatists that existed, they're no longer alive. They've all been sent to the front, and now the widows of these people are marrying the new incoming Russians that are being transported to Donbass to live. And same thing with Mariupol. It's not they're bringing in Russians. They're rebuilding parts of the city for Russians to live in. And the former Ukrainian residents who have had their buildings destroyed, they're not getting anything. So
well, in that hearing, I think I highlighted it, is that they talked about Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia. I forget what point at the they're it wasn't me, somebody else. Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary reliance on Russia energy is why they're not supportive of Ukraine. I think that's why Europe as a whole needs to get off Russian gas as much as possible, because now they're being India and China, like you said, they're getting deals for now. Then Europe, they're just being treated like a mob boss.
Well, the Chinese and the Indians are buying oil, refining it, and then selling it back to the West, and some of it's being sold back to Russia. because Russia's in dire shortage of fuel for planes and tanks right now too. They're going to even have their distribution system and providing food to the people of Russia, or they're going to have to send all that fuel to the war effort. So they can't have both, and it's not going to be both. It's going to be probably the war effort. So yeah, the block needs to be put on the Chinese and the Indians from reselling the stuff, and they're making a profit because they're buying it at 30-40% below world market price, refining it, which adds another profit margin higher than that. So they're getting tremendous profit margins on that. Used to be, the oil trade, 5% profit on a tanker load was, considered good. I was dealing with an oil trader at one time, an Egyptian, rich Egyptian who was on the Bank Paribas, and he'd be able to sign $10 million checks for a tanker full of oil. So know that system well. Not only that, but they can identify where that oil comes from, because at that time somebody tried to sell them Iranian oil. They ran a test on it. They run a spectrograph on it, and they can tell exactly what area it comes from. So it's not oil is fungible and can't be traced. It can be traced where it comes from. So they can't say, oh no, we didn't buy it from Russia, because Russian oil has particular characteristics. So.
Yeah. So Irina sent me a comment. She said, "But if the whole world had closed the sky over Ukraine immediately in 2022, we would not have discussed many of these issues now." In there, let me make sure I speak so she hears. So
I agree with her, and I think if we had done something in 2014, actually in 2008, if we'd taken Ukraine into NATO, we wouldn't have this problem either. If we'd taken Ukraine and Georgia into NATO, we would not be talking about this. So a few people are responsible for that. We know who they are.
Yeah,
she's no longer in power.
Yeah,
Comrade Merkel or whatever her name was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so having a Ukraine giving all the weapons to succeed so that they don't have their skies covered with was it ATACMS or HIMARS and F-16s. F-16s took forever to receive into Ukraine. We should have had that in a long time ago, but putting into NATO as soon as possible, or on the track to NATO, is going to be critical for the long-term
well,
success.
the attacks, I just sent this out on LinkedIn and Facebook from the Secretary of State. New package provided for Ukraine. Additional stocks provided include NASAMS, RIM-7 missiles, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, 155, 105, cluster munitions, high mobility, HIMARS, javelins, and tube-launched optically tracked tow missiles, light tactical vehicles. Don't see ATACMS on there anywhere on this list that they just provided. $425 million worth to Ukraine.
And what's really critical too is let Ukraine strike Russia on Russian territory, on Russian targets.
Absolutely. This is, you're asking Ukraine to go kick ass and then tying one foot behind their back, and that doesn't work. So we're all in favor of that, and I don't know. I have my theory about who's pulling the strings behind Joe Biden, but he's still the president. But he never really was the president. I think there was somebody else pulling the strings there behind him. So it's a good question of what's going to happen later, or who's going to still be pulling the strings back there. So don't want to be controversial, but that's my opinion. So you guys are in Chicago right now, girls?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Like the city? I grew up there.
Like the city, but don't a lot of pot. Don't see a lot of pot in the city.
Oh wow. Yeah, I gotta get somebody to show you around the city there. You need to get a tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys went from sunny, warm California to cold Chicago.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Where I'm at, we're having a cold wave right now. It's 92 Fahrenheit.
Very cold.
92 Fahrenheit, which is about 36, 37 degrees Celsius in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's 20 Celsius here, so but a little bit chilly, but it'll warm up and cool down where I'm at. So
yeah. So
let me see here from the comments section. So thank you everybody for your patience. Oh, this is called technical difficulties with great friends who speak different languages. Absolutely. So we got Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Russian. It's okay. It's not a problem. Albania, your English is good. Okay.
I had to learn English as a foreign language too. So
you also have to remember is that we talk to we listen to other Lithuanians that come here that don't speak English either, and I hear them and just kind of listen and get kind of get an idea. Okay. Zelensky released portions of the current victory plan presented to the U.S. and NATO. Okay. So I guess Zelensky's victory plan number 4 seems to address Donetsk, Donbass economic recovery and development. Okay. So definitely need to strive that to repair and rebuild as well. I mean,
there's going to have to be a Marshall Plan for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is going to be using frozen Russian assets and monies. And I think depending on the way the war goes and what they give away during the peace talks, there might be things that they give away that we're not going to be partial to and not have any control over. I don't think they'll give away territory, but they might give away, war crime immunities and stuff like that. But the Marshall Plan is going to be needed, and I think they're going to need to also extract reparations from Russia apart from the seized assets, because it is going to take quite a bit to rebuild Ukraine. I know just a little limited action we had in Panama where we only destroyed a few buildings, not too many, the Commandancia and that, those costs add up pretty fast to rebuild buildings. But I think a lot of European countries and Koreans and everybody else are going to jump in on that as long as the funds are available to redo that. And it will bring back a lot of Ukrainians to work and rebuild and everything else and reclaim their towns and villages. But it's an amazing thing. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Stuttgart, Germany. There's a whole hill that nobody knew about for a while. I was there stationed there with the army, and the whole hill was actually built out of the rubble of the bombings. And they just took all that rubble, piled it into one huge hill, and then they used to have mass on that hill Easter Sundays. But it was an amazing sight because you could see the sunrise and everything else from that hill of rubble that they carted off from the city.
I think Ukrainian Americans or Ukrainians worldwide need to start some type of technical training for some of these construction jobs and rebuilding, just so when the war ends, there's no delay of construction and rebuilding of Ukraine.
I think it's going down. The rebuilding is going on even while the war's still on. This is the one amazing thing you noticed about the Ukrainians is the buildings get knocked down, but the streets are cleaned up the next day, and the rubble is removed, and the traffic moves along the streets, even though the building's gone. It's kind of interesting. You watch movies of after World War II, the German ladies standing in line with buckets, moving brick by brick from the downed apartment buildings, and they reused all those bricks. So it's kind of interesting, the determination of the German people after World War II to rebuild their cities. And I think the Ukrainians probably will outdo them in that determination to rebuild their country. Something like a war, a just war, I think makes people prouder of their country and more supportive of their country and more willing to work together to accomplish these good goals. So I have nothing but admiration for the ladies here and for the Ukrainian people. They're an inspiration to us, and the only thing we got to watch in the United States is the Russian disinformation that's trying to tear us apart. It's constantly out there getting, Americans to fight Americans, and I'm sure some of it occurs in Ukraine too. But in the Lithuanian community, it's going on too. It's a campaign that we have. But yeah, the Ukrainians are an amazing people, and they're going to pull this thing off. But we need to help them as much as possible. Give them everything they need to win, not for as long as it takes, but for whatever it takes. And they're starting to hear that slogan in Washington. They stopped talking about however long it takes, and now they're talking about whatever it takes to win.
Razum. That's it. Not anything else. Just Razum. So.
And Blue Yellow USA. we're there we're there to help Ukraine win too.
Yeah.
So
I guess any final comments from any of the ladies for today or for your upcoming screenings?
Yeah, which cities are they coming to next for screenings? Is there a schedule that we can post?
Yeah, I can type it into the comments.
Okay.
Or into the description.
Ми не маємо зараз ще повного розкладу, щоб проанонсувати нашим глядачам, вашим глядачам, нашим глядачам. Але дуже хочеться, коли ми це опублікуємо, щоб люди прийшли та подивилися. Бо багато корінних американців зовсім не знають навіть те, що війна йде не 2,5 роки, а 10,5 років. Переклади, будь ласка, Аля.
My mom asked about future screening. We don't have exactly schedule, but it's very important because something American people don't know about what happened in Ukraine, and every this screening it's very important for ask about happened in Ukraine, about war, about important for all Earth, all countries in this world, maybe.
Very, very, very true. Very true. The more people see this movie, the better off, the better for Ukraine, the more people that can see this. And also the better for the countries, America and other places to understand what's really going on in Ukraine. Because I think, just reading about it in the news is not, you tend to, something else in this part of the world. But when you see that the effect it has on lives and people's, it's a tragedy, and that tragedy is something that needs to be publicized to the whole world. Totally agree.
Ukraine is defending civilization from barbarianism from the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
So Ukraine must win.
Prevail. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And Russia must lose.
So дякую for coming in. You know,
Thank you
and
for invite, Conrad.
Slava Ukraina.
Героям
Welcome,
слава.
Okay.
absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. And you know, if you're watching, you have to see this documentary, Mariupolis 2, coming to a city to you. Just reach out to us if you have a group of screenings. We'll get it scheduled and work it together. All right. So have a great day, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Дякую.
Дякую.